It's a grim picture, y'all. Just check out the numbers. Using a typical success rate, 11 to 26 public land hunters out of 100 are going to kill an elk this year. 85 to 90% of those people are the guys and girls consistently getting it done. That means for most of you, especially all you guys and gals heading out west for the first time, according to those statistics, only 2 to 4 of you out of 100 are going to kill an elk on public land this year. Is that really your reality? You know what we say to that? We say, screw the statistics. Listen close and understand something. You and you alone create your reality. In this episode, as your elk hunting coaches, we're going to talk about beating those odds. We talk about statistics, crowds. We look at all the possible negatives, the excuses out there, and how they are all really just opportunities in disguise. Those topics, as well as our weekly shout outs. So friends, like my brother Gilbert always says, pull up a chair, adjust your volumes just right, and welcome to Blue Collar Elk Hunting.
Welcome to Blue Collar Elk Hunting, brought to you by ElkBros.com, with your host Gilbert Ornelas and elk hunting coach Joe Gilliam. You want to hunt elk, and they live to hunt elk. Their goal is to share with you what they have learned grinding it out for over 35 seasons, doing what they love. So come on into camp and set a spell. Welcome to Blue Collar Elk Hunters.
Hello again, everyone. If this is your first time with us, glad to have you. Hope you enjoy our show today. And for all you blue collar grinders out there who are always following our show, welcome back to Elk Camp. I'm Joe Gillia, and to my left, my lifelong hunting partner and brother, Leroy Chavez. We call him Chav. You've probably noticed that our usual host, Gilbert Ornelas, the big O, old Deadeye himself, is missing today. So Chav and I are going to try to fill in, and those are some big shoes to fill. So just bear with us today. And it's going to be kind of tough with Gilbert because can't nobody tell a story like that.
Yeah,
guy.
Nobody can tell a story like Gilbert. So, yeah, definitely going to miss him.
Yeah. So we look forward to having Gilbert back next week. So we're going to go ahead and get our party started today with our ElkBros shout outs. So if you're new to the show, these are the shout outs to just a few cities with the most listeners topping our charts this week. We like to go in, we look as soon as our show comes out each week, and we look for those top 5 cities out there that are the listeners coming in big. And we try to find those cities that are new to the show and give us a bunch of listeners. So, topping the chart this week, originally known as Cane Island, this city started out as the hunting ground for the Karankawa Indian tribe and was home to great herds of buffalo, big flocks of wild ducks, geese, sandhill cranes, and other game birds, as well as longhorn cattle, deer, and wolves. Katy, Texas in the house. Yeah,
isn't that where Luis is from?
That's where Luis is from, that area over there. Yeah. In fact, I think we told the story how that one year they had the big giant flood.
Yeah.
And these guys did not even have an elk tag. They had no opportunity to hunt elk. And they're still calling us saying, if we get a bear tag, if we get a turkey tag, can we come into elk camp? And they're sending photos from Katy, Texas. And he's got 7 foot of water around his house, and he's in his garage packing up, saying that he wasn't going to miss elk camp that year. And all of them made it through that hurricane.
Yeah, they sure did.
Yeah, pretty crazy.
Okay, up next, you might get directions using Touchdown Jesus as a landmark. Find a local brew at Wooden Legs. Climb the 180 steps of the Campanelli, or take part in the 100-year tradition of Hobo Day in Brookings, South Dakota.
Brookings, South Dakota.
Yeah, it kind of confused me there because I thought Touchdown Jesus was in South Bend, Indiana also.
Oh, really?
Notre Dame,
Oh, yeah. They had the Touchdown Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess that's what people actually use that in their town. They use it for directions there. Go down, get by Touchdown Jesus, take a right. So, yeah, it must be something that everybody knows. Up next, this town is home to Ole Miss University is known as the cultural mecca of the South, and for only $5, y'all, you can ride the Flying Tuck. The Flying Tuck.
Flying Tuck.
Yeah, that's a little comedic though. An open electric car that will take you anywhere within a 2-mile radius of the town square or Ole Miss campus. Oxford, Mississippi.
Oxford, huh?
Oxford. Thanks, Oxford. Just great having you guys out there listening.
Okay, an estimated 500 resident moose call this city home, and during the winter, the sunrise and sunset are pretty much the same thing because the sun is only up for 4 to 5 hours.
All right, before you say this city now, they said moose, 500 resident. We know we're talking up north someplace. Yep. And, it's got to be either Canada or Alaska, right?
Yep, you got it. Fairbanks, Alaska.
Fairbanks, Alaska. And hey, Alaska, thanks for coming on, man. There were only 2 states that we were waiting to get onto our podcast. It was Rhode Island, which is also on now, and Alaska. So Fairbanks, we're pumped to have you guys there, man. Last but not least, named for the 5th president of the U.S., this city has an agricultural history and was part of the White Hills Purchase that transferred land from the Pawcatuck. You think that's how that's said?
Pawcatuck. Oh.
Pawcatuck Indians. It's Monroe, Connecticut. Another northeast coast state there. Thanks, Monroe. Nice to have you in the house. So, before we move on, we also wanted to thank all of you that have rated us on iTunes. I think Chav and I were just talking, and it was about how many ratings we had? Something like 35.
Yeah, about 35. A good number. But, we'd like to hear from all of you. That hunting season's coming closer and closer, so don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah, and, to get those 5-star ratings, 35 of them on iTunes, that's huge for us, and it really tells us that you're getting something of value from us. So we sure appreciate that. And we're going to give a huge ElkBros shout out and thank you to a few listeners that have left some great reviews for us. And guys and gals, when you do leave a review, please, guys, include your first name and state so we can recognize you. We're real big on family. We do this whole thing because, this is kind of our brotherhood. We really want to keep it personal, and we want to thank all you guys that recognize us, so we want to recognize you. First up, Eric Clark from Wisconsin. Eric, thank you so much. Eric is also the host of the Where to Hunt podcast that we just did with the Whitetail series, and we had it both play on his, and we actually played it on ours. I think it was a week before last week. So Eric, thanks, guy, for the kind words that you gave. Chris from Massachusetts. Chris says he feels like he's cheating listening to us. And hey, that's cool, man. That means he's learning something.
He's learning something, yeah, right?
He's definitely getting some value. Raphael from Texas. And I'm not sure if Raphael's one of those Katy, Texas boys, because he says that he's listened to all of our episodes, and yet, in fact, he's learning to call with the diaphragm call. He's got 3 diaphragm calls. He said he's not sure if what he's making right now are real cow elk sounds, but he says he doesn't have an elk tag. He doesn't have a hunting partner. He doesn't even have any current plans to go elk hunting. He just got so pumped listening to our podcast that he wanted to just send in and tell us how excited it is that he's getting ready, and hopefully one day he's going to change that and he's going to head to the mountains. We also want to thank Mark Newman from Indiana, Zach Reiswig from Idaho, and we have Z Wellesley, and I'm going to guess that Z is Zach. There's not a whole lot of Z's out there. Zeb, could be, but I'm taking a chance, Mr. Wellesley, that it's Zach. He said that he has never hunted elk before, and him and 3 of his buddies are, after listening and stuff, they're just going to take off and go for it next year. So, if you heard us on our last one, and we were talking about, from whitetail hunting to elk hunting, that's one thing that we encourage, guys, is that if this is something that you want to do, go out and do it. Don't let there be things that are going to keep obstacles in your way. You can do this. And you go out and you get that experience the first time, it's a life changer,
Right.
you know?
Yeah, go for it. You know, you never know what's going to happen, and you never know if we're going to be here tomorrow. So,
Yeah,
go for it.
heck yeah.
Right.
YOLO, right?
Right. YOLO.
Yeah. For you guys who don't know that, you only live once. And the funniest compliment that we got, Chav, came out of Durango. Didn't get a name. Durango, Colorado. I hope we get one, but it was awesome because it was very complimentary and said, great stuff, even though one bro is a Texan. They're playing on you, Gilbert. Yeah. And actually, we got more than one bro that's a Texan because we have the Venezuelan mafia, but those guys do reside in Texas over there. One of them in Dallas and one in Katy, Texas. So
Right.
they're a little spread out. So want to thank all of you guys for your reviews. And for the rest of you, if you go to give us a review, you have to do that on iTunes. You're not able to do it in any of the other podcast apps. So we really appreciate it if you take the time, go ahead and give us a review. Let us know what you think. It really tells us that we're doing the right thing for you guys. And if you have any questions, and I mean, the questions are rolling in. Now, I'm about a week behind on answering. So if you guys have sent some questions in to me, my wife and I, Loretta, we just celebrated our 37th anniversary, and we took a cruise to the Bahamas, and we were totally out of pocket. We couldn't get anything from anybody. So I got home last night. We got everything ready to record today. I'm just starting to go through letters and emails now, and we have a whole bunch of viewers' questions that's pretty much what our next podcast is going to be. We're going to base our topic on that again, and then we're going to do Q&A with those other questions.
Yeah, I think that'll be a really good podcast because, the season is quickly approaching, and there's probably a lot of pertinent questions.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we might be able to help you out there. So, and don't be afraid. Any question is not a dumb question.
Yeah, well, last time you told me no dumb questions, right? But, yeah, the other thing, I know I saw one of them, and it was something I would have never thought about. And one of the person was asking about, have we had any occurrences or interactions with large predators while we're elk hunting? Have we ever been stalked by a bear or a cougar or anything like that? So you're gonna have to stay tuned next week for that one, because we do have a couple stories on that, and it was an excellent question. So we'll get on that next time. So Chav, let's get into today's topic, and today's topic's basically about, we brought up the stats at the beginning, and we're talking about beating the odds and how the negatives and all those possible excuses for failure are just really in the right hands opportunities for those people that understand elk. That there's so many things that people can make excuses about.
Right.
And we're going to bring up those excuses here in a little bit. But this topic actually came from Instagram. And basically the comment was that we should be telling our listeners to lower their expectations, that the success rate is extremely low, the cost is extremely high, and the woods are full of hunters everywhere behind every tree. And that, according to that reality, for the hunters going out there this year, they should understand that your outlook is pretty doggone bleak. So, so how do you feel about that?
Well, sometimes the statistics speak for themselves. And I know in our case, using Gilbert as an example, and then myself,
right?
But starting with Gilbert, it took him a couple of years before he connected.
Right.
And if memory serves me right, the last 3 years that he had a license, he killed one.
Right.
So that experience factor is real important because, a lot of it's trial and error. And even though you were guiding him some of those years that he did not get one, a lot of it was not being ready at the right time or not positioning himself right.
Right.
So a lot of it was just, and of course, he did have a problem with weight, which he overcame.
And that was huge.
Yeah,
actually.
that was really big. Yeah. So, those factors led up to him being very successful the last 4 or 5 years.
Right.
And with myself, I look back and I try to go back my memory banks, and I came up with I think I've killed close to 18 either a cow or a bull elk.
Right.
And I know the first 2, 3, maybe up to 4 years, I didn't kill one.
Had opportunities.
And I also shot 4 that I was not able to find, and that will happen also. But when you look at the percentages, that's well over 50%. And most of the time I was with you. Right. And those years that I did not get one, I did have at least 1 or 2 opportunities during the hunt. And again, that was just experience. The more you learn, trial and error, the better you get at it.
Well, some of that too, though, was you staying within your skill set too, because there were animals that I remember you not taking shots at that I'd have laid down. Yeah. At that point in time, you didn't feel comfortable past 25, 30 yards.
Right.
So you weren't shooting that. Mm-hmm. And, you had animals at 35, 40 yards that, I would have definitely taken a shot.
Yeah, I can remember several being in the 40, 45 yard range, mm-hmm. and I wasn't comfortable with my accuracy at that point. Plus, I wasn't exactly sure the range. I didn't have or didn't use a rangefinder.
We didn't have them then.
Yeah, we couldn't afford them. That's one thing about Joe is he's got a built-in rangefinder, which made it pretty easy. But if he wasn't close to me and if you weren't able to tell me, okay, that's 35 yards, I'd have to pass up the shot because it could have been 45.
Right. So,
a lot of that is, circumstances, but a lot of it is trial and error, and you learn as you go. So, I'm pretty optimistic when I get out on the field, right. that it can happen. You can't come in with a negative attitude, because if you do, it will happen. You won't get anything.
Yeah. And, when I'm thinking about you again out there, you didn't have any of the calling skill sets at that time.
Correct.
You have always been a stealthy hunter because, again, we started out as deer hunters, so we deer hunted together for years. So being able to move in on things and to take shots wasn't the issue. It was pretty much like you said. It was just that experience. You weren't able to call and stop your own animals, things like that. It had to be something that I had to do with you. But you did hunt on your own a lot and create opportunities. But you basically did it just stalking in on animals.
Yeah, I think basically 5 or 6. I was by myself when I shot them.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is getting off the roads and getting into that thick stuff and not be afraid to venture away from an established dirt road or an area like that.
Right. So, I kind of wanted on my viewpoint, when I heard this come in from the guy on Instagram, that basically I should be telling people to lower their expectations, that success rate is low, that the woods are full of hunters, that, that it's bleak. Look, guys, you need to understand something. I'm just not built like that. And I got news for you, neither is Chav. Chav has been, we have worked together both coaching and hunting for 30-some years. And actually probably coached together longer than we did hunt together because we did that earlier. And as my mentor, this guy comes from, small town USA. It's not tiny town Cimarron, but it's smaller town USA. And he actually ran cross country on a national championship team, him and 2 other guys from his small town in cross country at the beating D1 level, the top D1 teams out there. So I don't think you've ever had poor me or statistical or any of those type of attitudes. I don't think you're built like that to look for excuses.
No, you always look for the silver lining, even on a bad day or
mm-hmm.
A bad year. And like I said, our bad years, we still had opportunity.
Sure.
Those 2 years you didn't connect. You had an opportunity, but things just didn't fall right.
Right.
And those years that I didn't get anything, I still had opportunities, but, again, placement is important, where you place your body as they're coming in, and, those factors. And of course, whether or not they're within your range.
Right.
What do you consider your range?
And I just want y'all to know out there, I've just never been good about talking about what you can't do, and you're not going to hear that really from me. Uh, the one gift that I got from my father before he died was something he used to tell me every day. And it's my mantra. It's on things that I write on. You can talk to guys that I hunt with. They use it all the time because they hear me say it so much. And the one thing that my dad used to always tell me was, where there's a will, there's a way. And I truly believe that, because here's my reality. I came to New Mexico as a backwoods boy from the Carolinas, had never seen an elk before in my life. I've hunted public land with a bow on poor man's wages, basically a college student, poor man's wages. And then the first year of marriage, my wife and I got married when we were 20. And then on an average Joe's salary, literally an average Joe's salary. I hunted an area with a lot of hunters using the same equipment. I've used the same equipment for 10 to 15 years as far as my bow, and the arrows have been upgraded because of one Gilbert Ornelas. He's a drug pusher, pushed that carbon on me, but so we're doing that. But I've shot the same broadhead, camo as people have bought it for me, but equipment, I've stuck with the same thing 10 to 15 years. And most of the time back then, Chad, we did everything on bologna and peanut butter and jelly and Snickers, Snickers bars out there. And yet I've taken 33 elk in the last 35 years on state land. Now, I know a bunch of you guys are going, well, how'd you draw all those years? And I've got a lot of buddies that are wondering that too. But one of the secrets is we put in for an area that's real hard entry, rough country, low success rate in those areas, and yet we make it happen. So
Right.
We would rather be elk hunting than not, so we kind of try to find those types of areas. But remember something, statistics are based on past results. They can't predict the future, and please understand that you and you alone create your own reality. Sure, there's all kinds of variables that you have to learn to deal with, and things, that the animal's going to do, and other hunters, and you have weather. But, big deal. You are still in control of how you deal with that. I mean, when you take a look, did Fred Bear, Wayne Carlton, Larry D. Jones, Doug Walker, Dwight Shue, when you look at those guys that started all this stuff out, some of those early guys out there that were doing things with the equipment that they had, not doing it with the stuff that's available today, they didn't make excuses. They went out and got it done. And I kind of refer to things as what I call, you've got to have what I call a unicycle mentality. And what I mean by that is, when I was a kid, I think I was 12 years old, my stepdad, I lost my real dad when I was 13, and my stepfather brought a unicycle home to all 6 of us kids, and he set it out there, and he basically said, well, I have this unicycle. If you guys want to learn to ride it, go ahead, but I can tell you, nobody here will. So
he challenged you right off the bat.
Yeah, he threw down that challenge, and I've just never been real good at saying that you can't do something, and that's what I mean is, by a unicycle mentality, you have to relish the challenge. You're going to take your lumps and bumps. You got to work at making progress, not excuses. I mean, honestly, out of us 6 kids, everybody tried it out. We were all fighting for turns and doing all that. People fall down, people bump the unicycle's real tough on your ankle bones.
No, I can imagine.
I mean, it just rakes them up. You get all cut up, and after a while, it went from 6 to 4 of us to 2 of us, and I was the last one working that. And you can make excuses as to why, it's too hard, or there's no way I'm going to do this, or why I'm even learning it. What am I going to do with that? But you find a way. You do what other people have given up on days ago. And that's what I mean by that unicycle mentality. And, you know, if you relish those, forget about what the stats are, guys, because you're listening to something like this, because of what you have on the World Wide Web, the things that you can walk, you know, going out there at Corey Jacobson and Elk 101 out there, you know, watching the Born and Raised guys out there. So many opportunities to be able to learn stuff. And you can take and flatten that learning curve out. So, are the cards stacked against you? Only if you let them be. I still, like you said, you still go in the woods with confidence when you go out there.
Right. Uh-huh. Yeah, like Joe said, with all the technology available today, you know, you can actually go out there with some experience, at least mentally, when you get out there. And then, you know, with all the new developments with GPSs and
Oh
stuff,
my gosh.
that makes a huge difference. I mean, back in the day, you know, once nightfall came along and you're looking for your trail with your flashlight, everything looks the same.
Right.
So, you know, I would always head back to camp, you know, an hour before the sun went down and it got dark.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't know if I'd make it back to camp.
Right. You were losing out on that.
And actually the last hour to half hour of daylight is probably the best time in the afternoon. Likewise in the morning, you know, if you're not hearing anything or seeing anything, you got to get out early in the dark and do some calling.
Sure.
And that's probably the best time to hear anything. You know, the woods are still, it's sound carries really well. And if you can hear at least a bugle or a cow call, you know, you can get yourself in position to be successful. But you got to get up early. I mean, we're talking, you know, 3:30, 4 o'clock.
Sure.
Just to get dressed up and ready to move out there. So, you know, you got to take chances. And the GPS comes in handy again.
It has totally changed the game. And we're going to come, before I go too far, I want to make sure, because I gave you guys some resources out there, some other names to remember and go check out. Randy Newberg is phenomenal. Randy's been doing this stuff for years. Randy, I still have you on H, by the way, though. Another one, I think it's Chris Rowe that's doing, you know, he's a biologist that has done some incredible things out there. I really love Paul Medell's stuff as well. Michael Batiste, if you haven't listened to Michael Batiste and looking into his Elk Academy, then you're missing out. He does a Wapiti Wednesday live every week, and he's just phenomenal. I've got a chance to meet and talk with Michael, and he's just a great guy. So there's some more of those resources, guys. You listen and learn from anything and everything you can. You know, here we are telling you go listen to all these other guys as well. And the reason that is because we are elk hunting coaches, and it's about you being successful. So the more you know, the more you know. Okay?
Yeah, if you're going to be a successful hunter, you know, it's like being a successful coach. You know, we were very successful in track and field, but we stole the good ideas from everybody. And likewise,
and fast.
Yeah, and fast. And likewise, we're giving you other people that you can listen to, so you can form your own opinion. But also at the same time, your knowledge of elk hunting is just getting bigger and bigger, and that'll help you out when you get out there.
Just build that database, man. I mean, that's all you got to do is the more of this knowledge that you soak in, and we're going to talk about things as we keep going with that. So let's get back on topic. And I know you were talking about the GPS, and you were talking about how that has changed things. And really, honestly, to me, that was one of the biggest game changers out there. And, you know, we talk about the GPS, and our GPS that we use today, we use our cell phone, and we use OnX Maps on our cell phone for $30. And I believe, listen, I bet you could probably use BRO, B-R-O, as a code from Born and Raised out there. And I know I just listened to another podcast of somebody else that has a code to probably get you 15 or 20% off on that. So if you go listen to some of these other guys, you're going to be able to get some of those promotional codes that will actually get that $30 cheaper. But for $30 and the material and the data you get, it's unbelievable. And we're firm believers. And we are not sponsored by Onyx. They know that we want to help people, so they help us help y'all. Okay. So back on subject, big question is we told you how to beat the crowds. So how do you beat the crowds? And there's something that we're going to go back to the stats. All right. And there's a part out of that I want you to double check that you heard. Whatever the success rate is for an area, generally 85 to 90% of those animals, of that 25%, of that 14%, of that 30%, 85 to 90% of those animals are consistently taken by the same people year after year. For example, you taking 16 elk out of an area, 50%, right? Me taking 33 out of 35. So that's what they're saying by that. And I want you to hear that, because if you see the stats, you believe the stats, and they are from the past, and they're telling you why. What are these people doing that is making them so successful? Okay, and that's kind of that's something that I really want to drive on, is that you go to Colorado. Colorado has one of the largest herds of elk there is, but it also has the largest amount of hunters in that area. But you still have guys every year being successful in there. You take New Mexico. Our average archery success rate across our state last year was 26%. So that means that over a quarter of the people out in the woods were taking an elk last year. Okay, so we have very crowded areas, because even though we have a lot of national forests, we have a lot of public land in our state. A lot of those areas do get a big influx of hunters. The area that Chav and I hunt, generally most places that we go are going to have. And I hear questions from you guys. What about if there's too much ATV access? Our areas always has a lot of ATV access.
I think we have some hunters that basically that's how they hunt.
Is on ATVs.
They're just on ATV hoping to see an elk just by the side of the road, and sometimes it happens. So that's how they hunt.
But the point is that it is crowded. So there are things you can do either to get away from the crowds, or in our case, we don't worry about the crowds. And we're going to talk about why. So what makes these other people successful? First of all, they go where others don't. They forget the trailheads. They stop at some areas on those forest roads without getting to a trailhead, and they're bailing off. And most of the time, they're going to bail off into those drainages that have really solid northeast thick areas that are going to have some drainage, have some water, going to have the cover, and it's going to have the feed. And they know if they have that in there, and most people are on those trailheads, that they're most likely walking by animals that are only 800 yards or a mile off the road. Which happens with us a lot,
right?
Even in crowded areas. Most of these people are going right by elk, right?
Yeah, there's we talked about people driving around, but there's also people walking the different roads out there,
right?
And there's a lot of roads that were made to help
logging and
logging and firefighting. So there's a lot of roads. A lot of old roads, I'm sure, just about anywhere in the Southwest.
Right.
So a lot of people will hunt just walking the roads. I mean, it's comfortable. I mean, you're not going to get lost.
Right.
But you got to make that effort to get off the roads.
Exactly. So it's kind of like this. as track coaches, we always try to get kids to go from just wanting to run the 100-meter dash to becoming hurdlers. And the reason we did that was everybody in the state wanted to run the 100-meter dash. It was easy, it was fast, it was comfortable, right? It
Right.
didn't hurt. But you get kids and you put a barrier in the way, and all of a sudden you take and limit all that competition down to about 10%.
Right. Yeah, that's a good
people.
analogy.
Yeah.
You go to a track meet and you have like 10 heats of the 100, where you only have like 3 of the 100-meter hurdle.
Of the hurdles, right?
Yeah. So it's you limit your competition.
Exactly.
Actually.
And that's exact things that happen in all these areas. A lot of people are staying on the trails, on the ATV roads, at the trailheads, and they're walking and going where they're comfortable, where they're not going to get lost, and they don't get off and they don't bail off out of those areas, where they're actually going to have better opportunities. So it's probably 10%.
Right. And what makes it probably even less sometimes is the fact that they won't do it till daylight.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not going to get on a trailhead till I can see where I'm walking.
Exactly.
So
yeah,
they've eliminated a lot of time that there could have possibly been elk the way they're going through, but they're already gone.
Right. No, you're exactly right. A lot of times they'll hear animals bugling, and you hear this all the time, guys saying, well, as soon as I call, they started running away. And it's not they were running away, they were already going to their bedding area.
Exactly.
And they were moving away from them. So if you're going to go where others don't, forget the trailheads, stop and bail off, get off the roads, get in between them. Also, if you are going to use a trailhead, find the holes in that sweet spot zone. In other words, most people are going to hunt anywhere from the trailhead to a mile in. And then you have those people that figure, well, I'm going to get in deep, so I'm going to get in there 4 or 5 miles in, so I'm in basically by myself in wilderness, and come to find out everybody has that same idea. So generally there is a sweet spot between that trailhead, if you are going to use that as a main hike in, and where everybody's at. And you just kind of determine it's generally after that first mile and a half, and then before that 5 mile, 4 or 5 mile range out there. And that leaves a lot of country in there with a lot of elk. So the other thing is wilderness areas. It seems to me that wilderness areas are the magnet that everybody's like, well, I want a wilderness experience. So a lot of outfitters end up heading up in there, and a lot of guys will hike or get somebody to do a drop thing with them into those wilderness areas. So a lot of times, not always, it depends on that time of year. Some people don't like to hunt the first hunt. They want to hunt the second hunt, when it's closer to that prime time. But a lot of times those get to be the areas where most people flock to. So if you find those public areas that are outside the wilderness on those fringes, they can really be productive. You still got to do some work to get into those, but from the middle of those wilderness, wherever those camp areas are, towards those edges, most people don't get to. They're actually pushing them off sometimes into that. So that's something for you guys to think about. The other thing is you need to do what others won't. And that's what Chav was talking about. We're in the woods generally 2 hours before gray light. Definitely no later than 1 hour before gray light.
Right.
Because we're out there in the dark trying to locate animals. And when we're locating, I always start out with a cow call, but I do the cow call through my grunt tube. First of all, I'll cow call without it, and then I do it through my grunt tube. And I believe, especially in that early season hunt, that when you use a grunt tube and you do a cow call, it's more like a bow call. In other words, a bull elk. It's usually a bull mew, because that grunt tube gives that little bit deeper resonance inside there. And those bulls, they do mew to each other out there. And I've had bulls in that early part of the season come in, and I don't, part of me is debating whether or not they really think that that's a cow or another bull, just because of, they're still bacheloring in at that time.
Yeah, it could be either. It could be either, but you will get a response, a lot of times, right in the dark.
And And then, so our goal is that we're wanting to move in. So, the other two things is we might get in by dark, but if you can get out, and if you haven't located, you can get out there and you can night bugle, locate some of those other animals. And here's a huge one. If there's a lot of crowds out there, I guarantee you they're out of 100 hunters, you probably have a very tiny percent that are hunting during midday. Most guys
yeah,
go
for sure.
back to camp.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if it's an old wives' tale or not, but I would say 90% of hunters head back
Oh, yeah.
at 10 o'clock.
Yep. And really, so many elk, if you get on those animals in the morning and you hear them moving away, shadow those animals, go with them, get up into those bedding areas, make sure that you parallel them off to the side. You want to be on the downwind, away from those thermals going up. So you want to parallel them almost to the same level that they're up, and that keeps you in good position so that once they get bedded, all you got to wait is till about 11 noon, between 11 and 1 o'clock, those bulls will come off. They've got their cows bedded, and it is prime time for taking an animal. So hunting those animals in the midday is a great opportunity where you have crowds. Another thing is recognize what others have not. In other words, all the variables out there that are determining elk's actions and reactions, you got to be able to recognize those variables and how it affects the animals. The sun, the moon, the water amount of it, the not having water, the feed, the cover, the time of year, and the pressure. If you recognize those elements and you put them together with the time of year and what the animals are doing, it's really going to help you to do and be in the best position, especially before a lot of those other guys. But I think you said the prime one is the early bird gets a worm.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Make sure that you're out there, because most of the time I specifically can remember getting on a bull in the dark, right as it got to be shooting light, got in between him and his cows, shot the bull at 12 yards. I'm actually skinning the bull out. I'm not 100 yards from an ATV trail, and it's a good 30 minutes after daylight, and I hear all the ATVs coming down the trail.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm actually skinning out an animal, and they're going right by me. Never saw me cleaning the bull.
Right.
5 different ATVs drove by me and never saw what was going on. So,
and yeah, I can also remember a time that we were on a herd and they were feeding in front of us, and a couple of ATVs came right by, within 100 yards.
Right.
And all the elk did was look up and put their heads back down. So they're not always as shook as a lot of hunters think they are,
No, that's exactly right.
Or real skitty. I know we had a friend that said if you spook them, they're going to be 3 counties over.
Right.
If that were true, the elk would run out of territory.
Yeah.
They got to go somewhere, and they just can't leave the whole area, because they'll be running the whole time.
Yeah. No, it definitely doesn't happen. We've had animals that have spooked that have actually spooked back, and then they kind of go around the edges and end up going around whatever spooked them and meeting on the other side, going in the direction they wanted to go. So, no, you're totally right. They're not always as jumpy as you think. I think we've told several times about, we had that one morning that we killed 2 bulls, should have had 3 down. And
yes,
it was easily within a mile of a designated camping area.
Mm-hmm.
That everybody left.
That everybody left to go hunt somewhere else.
Right.
And should have had 3 down, and I think everybody would have had an opportunity too. There were opportunities.
Hey guys, elk are incredibly adaptable. I'm sure, and if you don't live in elk country, just talk to people who have. A bunch of us, we drive and we see elk on the side of the road. Gosh, I just saw some just the other morning. There were 5 bulls, and they weren't 50 yards off the road in the reeds on the side all the time. And there's people that have had them in their backyard. There's towns that have elk inside their towns. So if elk are that jumpy, if they're that skittish, there's no way you would ever see them in those areas.
Right.
But they adapt to the
Yeah,
situation.
we came back from Denver International Airport from a trip that we took, and there was an elk herd in a subdivision. I mean, they were running around.
Right.
But
in the houses.
But in that between houses and stuff, it was crazy in the middle of the day, no less.
Yeah.
So. Yeah,
and you'll see them bed down in areas like that. In our yard, we have buck deer bedded in our yard all the time. Now you come up against them out in the woods out there with wearing camouflage, they're gone. But so that's what I'm saying is that when you hunt in crowded areas, don't think just because you've come across another hunter, because you've come across another camp, that's all lost in that area, because it's not. And even when you run into other hunters, how many times have we run into guys that, we've been in elk all morning screaming, had encounters, and we bump into hunters, different groups of hunters, and they say,
I've never seen anything.
Haven't seen anything or heard anything.
Yeah, you can take advantage of excuses. There's a lot of excuses, why they can't find something. But, for every excuse, there's the other side to it.
Definitely.
For example, if it's really windy, well, you can stalk them.
Right.
Get closer to them.
So, that was one of our topics, guys, that we were going to talk about, is that sure, there's you can take any situation and you can make it into a negative. We've all heard the old thing has been used so much, to take lemons and make lemonade, right? Well, like Chab just said, you used to do an excuse T-shirt for track athletes too.
Yeah.
It was too hot, it was too cold, it was too windy, it wasn't windy enough.
Probably 100 different excuses.
Yeah. So you go out and it's windy. You're not able to hear real well. But gosh, that is a great condition for stalking in on an animal, especially if you have a good strong wind coming out of one direction. It's hard for them to notice movement. It's hard for them to hear. So super situation for a stalk. You just got to get out there and you got to change your tactics a little bit. You just got to work. You got to smell them out. You check for sign, move to those bedding areas. Try to get where you can spot them early in the morning. If it's windy and you can't hear anything, and get some place to spot so that you can locate them right at sunrise in a feed area and put the stalk on those puppies. All right.
Yeah. If you can smell them, just head in that direction, really slow, but you can stalk them then.
It's another excuse.
Oh, well, sometimes it's too hot.
Too hot. And I've heard people say that the animals aren't rutting because it's too hot. And let me let you guys know something. There's two things that go with that. Is that the equinox is what determines the rut. A cow elk coming in heat is what determines the rut. So it has, if it was strictly because of how hot or how cold it was, then elk down in southern New Mexico, down in those sage flats, would never go into rut. And and they're going berserk down there. So that has nothing to do with it. What it does have to do with is how much time they're going to feed and be active at night versus during the day. And, but still, if it's too hot, night bugle, be on them at sunrise, hunt the trees, and especially in the afternoon, instead of waiting for them to come down to their feed areas, to those open parks, you find the transitions in the trees between their bed and between where they want to be at the parks, so that you're in them in the shade where they're moving around. They're probably feeding in those trees.
Yeah, where they're transitioning. And then find the water. That's, if it's hot and it's dry, find that water.
Midday wallers is a great opportunity. Right? Yeah,
we told you several times about our experience with a herd coming in right at noon.
Noon, 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock, 95 degrees.
95.
I mean, we're dying, but they're coming down. So, yeah, it happened.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard people say it's too dry, and so we just talked about that with the water. Then they'll say it's too wet. Well, if it's too wet, the elk are really more dispersed. So that really makes the hunters more dispersed. So think about this. In a lot of years when it's been difficult and it's been dry, there are areas that elk haven't been in because they concentrated to where there was moisture. Now you have real wet years. There can be holes that nobody has ever hunted because of all the bad years
Right.
that now has more moisture. It hasn't been overgrazed. It's an area that hasn't had hunters in it because they're not used to hunting those areas. So now, because it's a wetter year, you can find honey holes that people haven't hunted.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. The wind's at my back, you know. So, I mean, this happens to us all day long, every day. It seems like every time we start to go into the wind, that next thing we know,
You can feel it like,
yeah,
oh.
it starts blowing the other way, and it's on our back. And so, if you end up in a situation like that, especially if you're walking out of camp, it's not a big deal. Stay with it at your back. Make sure that you're walking with the wind at your back. Call to the sides. Call to the peripherals. That way, if you do get get a call back to you, now you can actually circle and come back into that wind. So all is not lost. Just because the wind's at your back doesn't mean everything in front of you, 180 degrees on each side, is smelling you. So
Yeah, the scent won't disperse like this. It's
right.
going to disperse like that.
And then it starts going up with the thermal,
Right.
especially if it's a morning heat. So it starts getting raised up. The wind was swirling. You know, I hear that one all the time. You know, gosh, I was in there, couldn't find anything. The wind was swirling. Well, that happens. The only way you can mitigate that is by staying parallel to the thermals. If you do that, you know, and what I mean is if the thermals and the morning thermals are coming up, then you want to stay off to the side of those thermals when you hear an animal, when you've got an animal that's talking back to you. So you want to get at the level of that animal and keeping that thermal parallel in front of you, and hopefully trying to keep the wind in your direction. That is something that is my favorite technique. I never like to trail behind animals going up a hill. I always try to get off to the side, to the downwind side of them, so that if the thermals change, my scent's not going direct to them. Plus, it puts me at their level when I'm going up. This is a huge excuse I hear. I can never get a clear shot, you know, and if that's happening, y'all, you need to reevaluate your setup. This is lesson time now. If you're not getting a clear shot, then you're probably not setting up in front of trees, in front of the trees and brush, in a spot with multiple shooting lanes. That's the first thing. As soon as I have an animal that I think is coming into me, the first thing I like to do, if I'm by myself, the first thing I'm going to do is, from the area I just called, I'm going to move up 20 yards and 20 to 30 yards, and I'm going to move downwind, 20 to 30 yards, because that bull is generally going to try to come in and
circle around
you. So it puts you in a position that now you're either going to be close to them to get that shot when they circle, or they're going to circle on the upwind side of you, even a better situation in that one. So make sure as soon as you hear that animal, man, you know, check your setup. Are you in front of everything? Do you have multiple shooting lanes from the direction that animal's coming? I look everywhere to start to figure that out. Okay. If I'm not by myself and I'm hunting with Chav, well, then what I want to do is I tell him right away, I move you up, right?
Move over, yeah.
Yeah. And so he's getting up, I slide back and I get further back from him. And now I'm actually trying to pull that animal by him. And it worked so well last year that the bull I shot actually came into his upwind side and kept coming into me. So,
right.
So didn't expect that one to happen like that. What's another excuse that you know out there?
Well, you know, a lot of people say, well, the bulls aren't hot, so they're not speaking, you know, at all, you know. And so if they're not responding to your cow calls, don't call. Try using different types of bull calls
Right.
to try and get them in.
Yeah, because it really depends on the time of year too.
Right.
So there's different variables as to when that happens. When people say the bulls aren't hot yet, that's generally early season. It's before the equinox, and then you got to work on those elk in pre-rut mode when the bulls are still measuring each other up. So start using those bull noises. Start using those bull mews when you're doing that as well. Use some of those. Raking is tremendous during that time.
Mm-hmm.
Because bulls now are still trying to determine their pecking order. So, if they're not hot yet, does not mean that they can't be killed. If you start acting like a bull, then especially if it's right when they're just starting to get their cows, or when they've just if they have herded their cows, if they're not responding, that if you start acting like a bull, making those bull noises and sound like a bull that has a cow in heat or is tending to his cows, now it's going to be other bulls, all those satellite bulls, either wanting to come in with you or wanting to be with you because it's of that bachelor group mentality. So in that situation, you're not going to know what size bull is coming in, but you'll get them coming in.
Yeah, when they're sparring in their quest to get into that pecking order,
right?
They'll spar, lightly. But if you can get one agitated, breaking a tree and stuff like you did last year,
right?
I mean, he's coming in hot, not necessarily looking for a cow, but to see who the challenger is. So
Oh, so that was a good point that I was going to bring up about the rut. One of the biggest excuses, and I had mentioned it before, and I was going to put that in. One of the biggest excuses I hear is the rut is late. Okay, so the animals aren't sounding off. So first of all, understand something, guys, that the rut is not a statewide, it's not a unit-wide, it's not an area phenomenon. So in other words, a lot of people think of the rut as this general thing that's supposed to happen.
Yeah, like from this date to this date.
Yeah.
That's the rut, and that's it.
And it's going to happen through the entire state.
Right.
Right? So it's like, well, it's time for the rut, so every bull is going to be rutting. And that's not the way it happens. The rut is initiated by whenever a cow comes in heat. So elk can be rutting in one drainage, and just right over the ridge, you can have a group of elk right there that aren't rutting because there hasn't been any cows that have come in heat yet. So that can happen. And we always talk about, when we're guiding, we say, yeah, I got a rut over in such and such canyon, or I've got a rut happening up here on top of the mesa. And generally, when that happens, when one cow comes in heat, that cow's going to be in heat for about 14 hours. And a lot of times, one cow coming in heat can trigger other cows to come in heat as well. So that's just something to remember when that happens out there. But understand that it happens in different areas. But even if they were late on the rut, elk can be taken in early season and pre-rut. They can be taken in peak rut, post-rut, and late season. So there are strategies to kill these animals at all these times. You just have to change your strategy. Don't make an excuse. It's just like that unicycle thing, like I told you about. You just have to think of a way to overcome. You have to think of things to be able to do something instead of a make excuse as to why you couldn't do it. Okay, so that's a big one. And along with that, when they talk about animals not being in the rut yet, they say bulls are coming in silent.
Mm-hmm.
So my answer to that is, if you got bulls coming in silent, good, they're coming in.
Right. Yeah, you just got to be aware.
Right.
Know where the wind's at.
Mm-hmm.
And if you had heard a previous bugle, they may be coming in just to check you out. So
which will happen a ton, right? We'll get that one response, and we'll actually start working towards that response. Never get another peep and you look up and that bull's coming in,
Right. Yeah.
you know,
It's happened several times.
because what happens is that bull is not, I mean, what they were doing is they were being verbal. They were saying, yeah, I'm here. They're being social. It's a location bugle, basically. They're not being aggressive. And so they don't want to engage necessarily. It might be early to where they're not really interested that much in cows. They don't want to be aggressive. They're still in that bachelor mentality, but they're coming in because they want to be social.
Right.
So when you hear that one response and you start to call to that response, man, use your eyes and use your ears. Generally, one of our techniques that we love to do is we love working through an area using some of those mews. And I tell the guys, I'm looking ahead, and we assign each a person to look to another side because they're going to be coming in from the side or right from the front. And we just want to spot them first. And we've killed a lot of animals that way.
Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they say, well, I just can't pull that herd bull off his cows. What do I do?
Yeah. Yeah. So, kind of depends. If you're wanting to kill that herd bull, then now it's stalking time. But if you're like us, I just live to call. So one way that you can try, there's a couple ways you can actually try to pull that herd bull off. Number one is try to call his cows off. And what I mean by that is you act and sound like another dominant bull that's not challenging that bull, but is trying to pull those cows, trying to display for those cows, raking branches, using the glunking, the low guttural noises, things that are kind of like you saying, hey, girl, I'm over here. And that'll tick him off. Now that's one way to get him off. Another way is for you to act like you have a hot cow, because that herd bull that is with those cows right now, he might be with cows, and we have seen this several times. He might be with those cows, and if none of those cows are in heat, he's just tending them, and he hears another bull that sounds like they have a hot cow. He knows where his are at, so he will leave, and he's like, well, I'm going to go get and breed that hot cow and then come back to mine. So he's going to go in, figures he can, beat you off of your cows or try to take that hot cow from you and breed that cow. So that's another option that you have for that.
Right. And there's a lot of hunters that, you run into that haven't seen anything. And another excuse they use is, well, we had a full moon, so the elk ate or fed all night long and disappeared as soon as daylight appeared.
Yeah.
So how would you hunt though?
Well, so guys, you've heard us already now. You've heard us say some of these things. So you have somebody that says that there's a full moon. You heard Chav. The elk are feeding all night during the full moon. And so what do? Man, if I know they're out there in the full moon, then I'm going to go out and night bugle, or I'm going to be out there 3 a.m. and finding those elk out there at night.
Mm-hmm.
We have even gone out and stayed with the herd. So we slept down in a lower drainage, knowing that the animals were going to cross above us, and with the thermals coming down, that we were going to be able to reverse their tactic. We could smell them. So we actually slept in the bottom of this drainage, just on the ground. You remember that, right?
Yep.
And about 11 o'clock, I caught the smell of those elk with those thermals coming down. We got up. Sure enough, we found those animals within 800 yards. We shadowed the herd all night long in the moon. We slept when they stopped. We moved when they moved, and we were on them right at daylight.
Right.
So sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah.
But again, that is that mentality. That's that unicycle mentality that I was telling you guys about. Relish that challenge. Make progress and find a way. Okay. Another excuse that I hear from people all the time is my hunting partner can't call worth a squat.
That is I.
No, it's not. So here's what you can do. You can make him or her the cameraman.
Got a camera.
Can they cook?
Oh, we got our cooks.
Yeah, we got our cook. Or you can use them as bear bait.
Possibility. Nail me to a tree.
No, so what we try to do here, guys, is we try to give you some things to think about. And our biggest point is that, don't let other people's thoughts of you being successful contain what you're going to do. Do the things, listen to all of the podcasts we've done on confidence, on the different areas, how to prepare yourself, get yourself ready in that, and keep learning. You do that, then you are not going to be on the bad end of the statistics. You are the person that's going to control what you do. So on our next show, we're going to head to our ElkBros mailbox for our topic of the day, and we're going to give answers to our listeners' questions. So remember, if you have questions that you want answered on the show, just send your question to info@elkbros.com. That's info@elkbros.com. If you like what we're doing, guys, please review, and I put that first. Please review. Subscribe to our podcast and rate us, please. You have to go to Apple Podcasts or iTunes to review. And you can always check out more elk hunting content at elkbros.com. If you go there, join our camp. You'll be in the know. You'll get any kind of information. I think we even did last week, we did a grinders email, which is basically, we called it our grinders bargains. When we hear of certain things out there, we send that out so to help people get some bargains on some things. Again, not from any sponsors. These are just things that I find out there online. So you'll get that if you're in the know. So that's
if you go to elkbros.com, I've written several stories of several of the hunts that we've had, and you'll find some tips in there that we may not have already told you.
Sure.
But it might reinforce something. So
awesome.
Keep that in mind.
Cool. So from Chav and myself, keep dreaming the dream, keep grinding to make it a reality, and most of all, don't forget to share it with the people you love. So laters, guys.
Later. Have a good week.